Welcome, everyone, to Audiobooks from Hell. I am your host, Sean DeRager. I'm very, very excited about today's conversation. In the booth with me today, well, not technically in the booth. It would get kind of crowded, but Travis Baldree is with me today, and I'm very excited to get a chat with Travis. Travis, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. I'm booth adjacent. Booth adjacent.
Yes. My kind of journey into meeting you and kind of getting to know you was basically, I was just starting out. I still feel like I'm just starting out, but I was just starting out in the audiobook game. And you had posted, hey, does somebody want a free audiobook of this book called Talon? And I was like, well, that sounds great. And you said something about it's a space barbarian with a plasma axe. And I was like, that's my genre for sure. So I grabbed that.
Right after Beastmaster every day
yes.
at 7, 6 Central.
Yes. So I grabbed that and I listened to those books and fell in love with those books. Me and A.A. Warren struck up a friendship, and then I ended up taking the reins as Talon in book 3, which will be out soon. So very interesting journey with meeting you and kind of all this stuff kind of falling in our laps. And you've been, from, your video games, developing video games with Double Damage Games, Rebel Galaxy Outlaw being the newest one, all the way to, your relationship with Will Wight and his series and how well that series has been. So I figured I would have Travis Baldree and talk about your journey into audiobooks, because it's, me following kind of your progression. It seems, and this is just me looking from the outside looking in, it seems like a lot suddenly, it just started rolling like a snowball effect with your work. So when did you start getting into, when did you start getting into audiobooks?
Nearly 4 years, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere around about there. I feel like that's what it is. Yeah, it's about 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And what was the catalyst to kind of bring you into it? Was it a dare?
No. I was, what was it? I was doing recording for game stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I was getting some microphone equipment because as we went into the next game, I wanted to improve the audio quality of the stuff that we were doing. And I ended up, doing a lot of voice work for it. And it was a crappy USB setup. It was junk. So I actually bought some proper equipment for doing it for the next game, because I wanted to elevate the overall audio quality of everything that we were doing. And I would have people come in and do recordings. And as I did that, I was like, well, my kids don't really need me to read stories to them anymore. And I did it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found ACX and, oh God, what's the public domain one? It's escaping me. LibriVox.
Yeah.
I did like a couple shorts on LibriVox just to kind of figure it out, just to see how I liked it. And I really enjoyed doing it. And then I think I did like I did 2 books before I had a booth just to try it out. It was down in a corner of the basement, and I took like an old microphone stand and I draped a blanket over it and put it behind it, and it was truly awful.
Yeah.
Then I kind of, we were going to do a ton of audio recording for the game with a ton of parts, and I was going to bring people in, and I didn't want to rent studio space. So I ended up buying a booth. And once I had a booth, I started doing a lot more, and did a few books on ACX, then started doing some for Tantor, and then just kind of progressed on from there. So initially it was just because my kids don't want me to read to them anymore, though. Really.
Well, and you were doing this along with the video games, right? You were juggling both.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because I've been
developing, your company. Was it your company or?
It's my company. I have a partner who owns it with me. But yeah.
Okay, so you're juggling the video games, which is already like just an intense,
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It's
not like a predictable kind of work. It kind of really long, intense stretches, because unlike audiobooks are great. Your project is not going to last more than 1 or 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's done. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can predict how long it's going to take, because it's like a solved problem. Maybe you have to learn a dialect, or maybe you have to tweak an accent, but, it takes this long to do this thing, give or take. And games are not like that at all. Games are like, I think we can get this done. I'm not exactly sure how we've done it. We're going to do it. We've never done it before, but I'm going to guess that it's going to take this long and this much money to do. And then you're inevitably wrong.
Yeah.
And, several years later, hopefully you finish and crawl across the finish line. So it's really different. It's really different.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a weird thing to juggle. And I'm glad to be moving to a point where I'm not going to have to juggle it so much no more.
Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing that I really appreciate about you and kind of how you approach the craft of audiobooks especially is because you're kind of technically minded, because you kind of solve these problems, you have done a few kind of, for help of other audiobook narrators, a few little videos, and you don't mind kind of showing people kind of your process. And that's something that I really struggle with because, number one, I just, like most of us, we're used to just talking in the booth, behind the mic with no one listening. You're putting yourself out there to kind of show your process. What pushes narrators to want to do that? Because I struggle with it because I don't know enough yet to really showcase what I'm doing, but I kind of like it, but then I also hate it.
So I'm an engineer,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm pretty process oriented anyway. I hate wasting time. And I don't know, I generally feel pretty strongly that I hate watching other people waste time too. It hurts me in my heart.
Right.
So, and you're never going to force anybody to do things your way, but if you can provide them with information that, takes some pain out of their lives and lets them, discover a way to work that maybe works better for them, then I think that's generally pretty rewarding to do. It just makes me sad to watch people flail around when they don't have to. And because the amount of time that you can save yourself if you do really streamline and tweak your process is exceptionally large. And if you're just doing audio, I mean, that's real money that you save yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming, part of the reason for you doing that was, you juggling, a couple jobs, you really, and I'm running to that right now, being home all the time. I really need to find ways to really maximize my time in the booth. And my ways haven't been working. And I'm like, I need to revisit some of Travis's videos because the way that I'm working right now isn't cut.
I mean, a lot of it is because I'm just an incredibly impatient person, just unbelievably impatient. So anything that I find tedious, I generally try and find a way not to do it because I just think it's boring. All the time I spent reviewing my own audio to do edits, just irrespective of proofing, just to go and clean up noises or whatever. It was just such a fantastic waste of time, and now I don't do it at all. And the amount of hours that you save is just unbelievable if you don't have to do that. I mean, obviously there's lots of cases where you're never in the position to do that anyway. You work for a publisher, you're not going to do that. But I don't like outsourcing my engineering for the most part because I know how I want it to sound and I can make it sound that way. So I find it difficult, especially since I can do it relatively swiftly, to do that. And the cost to do it, if you know how to do it, and if you can remove a lot of that time, is not insignificant. That's not that I want to take work away from engineers, but there's plenty of work to be engineered. I just happen to be in a position where I don't have to do that. So I like that shortcut. It also just means that my overall project turnaround time is considerably faster because you send something out for proofing and engineering, it's weeks, right?
Yep.
If you only have to send it out for proof and your engineering was done when you recorded it for the most part, you cut a really significant amount of time off of your project turnarounds, which is great. Especially if you're doing a lot of indie books and you're doing them for small pubs. So since I do a lot of game lit and lit RPG and fantasy stuff directly for an author or for a small publisher like Mountain Dale or Athon or whatever, being able to cut down those turnaround times is pretty great.
Yeah, definitely. And you kind of have it down to your process down to a science where and I've watched it, like you're kind of scrubbing things, taking out noises, redoing things really quickly, like as you go. So basically when you are done with a chapter, it's for the most part,
pretty much. I run my stack on it, and I run second opinion to make sure, and you paste on your room tone in the appropriate locations, front and back. But it's basically done, and I might have, after I've run my stack, something that is maybe very shy of the RMS range and just needs a little nudge. But it's deterministic, which means that this doesn't matter how you change the audio, since it doesn't use normalization. If you run the stack on a piece of audio, it will come out the same. You could run it on any subsection of a piece of audio, and it will always come out the same, which makes things really consistent and really easy to predict. And since I'm not mastering for other people, and I don't have to worry about their voice, and I don't go anywhere, I mean, I'm kind of set.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. And like I said, it's something that I've really kind of been pushing myself to really get down with my projects, because right now, they're all for author or indie publishers. Nothing with the major publishers yet, but like I said, like my plan, my plan's down the road. We got a couple years to go here. I'm just kind of slowly crawling towards the goal here. But so I want to talk about the genres you've been working in, because that's one of the reasons why I, before we even had met, I kind of gravitated towards your work. And so I jumped in and started listening to you with A.A. Warren's Talon series, the first 2 books there, and absolutely love them. I gravitate towards narrators who have very distinct voices, and I think that your voice has a very distinct tone to it, very distinct, and even the way you formulate phrases. That's Travis Baldree. Like, there's a way, and that's what's great. That's what I love about a lot of these narrators that I listen to. Matt Godfrey, same kind of thing, where I can tell a Matt Godfrey narration immediately, and that's what I really loved about your narration. I mean, speaking of, didn't he post today on Facebook on R.C. Bray's page? You were listed as
Matt posted that. Matt Godfrey posted that.
You were listed as a narrator that R.C. Bray's listeners listen to when they're not listening to R.C. Bray's. That's pretty. Well, it's a feather in your cap. So anyway, I got in. Like I said, I got into it with science fiction, and with science fiction, there's a lot of the gravelly voice in science fiction. R.C. Bray, of course, but
yeah, I've got nothing on R.C. Bray's gravelly voice.
But you have, but it's also very. You have many layers to your voice. You can do many different things with it, and you've kind of gravitated a lot lately more towards kind of the gamelet, right? And fantasy is as far as the newest releases that I've seen.
I do a lot of cultivation, which kind of slops over into fantasy and wuxia. So the Will Wight stuff is basically cultivation fiction. Yeah. It's, bodily improvement. It's distantly related to Chinese, cultivation fantasy. Tao Wong stuff is also very specifically, Chinese cultivation fantasy, but that tends to include a lot of fantasy elements. So I do a lot of that. And once I started doing Will stuff, I got a lot more of that. I started doing gamelit within the last year. It actually took me a while to get around to doing it, which is a little weird, but it did take me a while to get around to doing it. I think the first stuff I really did was with Mountaindale. It was, I think, the Chronicles of Ethan was the first real gamelit stuff I did. And now I just do a bunch of stuff for Mountaindale. And I love working with them just because they're fabulous human beings. And then it just kind of spreads out from there. So, yeah. And I enjoy it. I mean, I like the variety a lot. I like a lot of variety. So I would do almost everything if I could get it. People tend to generally, I have a book that's like this book. Who's somebody who narrates this kind of books? Oh, I like them. I want them to do this book. I mean, that's usually how most of my work comes to me. I get more variety probably from someplace like Tantor, or maybe Podium, because they're more like looking at their stable of narrators and then picking somebody. But still, it's mostly speculative fiction. That's mostly what I get. I'm just going to say speculative fiction because it's that broad range of, fantasy, sci-fi, horror, whatever. Yeah. I wish I got more horror because I love horror. I really enjoyed doing it.
Well, but, I mean, you may have a chance with Joe Hempel's new venture here. Yeah. Fireside horror. So yeah. No, more horror the better. And that's one thing that I've kind of been struggling with, not really struggling, but kind of trying to make sure that as much as I love horror and I'm trying to really kind of cast my net out in the genre spectrum to kind of include a lot of science fiction, some fantasy, and kind of have that spectrum because I think I want to say that helps. Like with there are certain narrators that fit into a certain genre. Like we've mentioned, R.C. Bray, like that's like, he's kind of like the definitive science fiction, military science fiction narrator.
I mean,
Like,
any genre you can get your stake in the ground in, that's a chance that somebody will see you and say, I liked what they did with that. I want another of those. I mean, if somebody brings me something that is outside of like what I normally get to do, I will usually try and find a way to fit it in if I can. I just did Comanche for Brett Riley for B, and it was because it was a Western horror, like ghost story almost. It's not.
Nice.
I wouldn't classify it really as horror. It's like Western ghost story, and a modern Western ghost story. And it was a lot of fun. I had a great time with it, and I just kind of squeezed it in at the last minute because they needed somebody to do it, and it wasn't something that I normally get to do that much of. So I was all over that.
Nice.
And the more things I get like that, I will almost always try to find a way to cram them in.
How does your work process go if you're cramming something in? Is it
So
is it like, all right, I
usually,
gotta cram this prep session and I gotta,
so usually I usually book 1 day for 3 hours of audio plus 2 days, usually. And that usually gives me, or at least right now in COVID times, I would probably do it a little bit. I would do it a little bit broader if it wasn't COVID times and I had an idea when the weekend was.
right.
And that gives me a little stuff, and I can usually squeeze things in. Maybe plus 3 days is probably more accurate. Plus 3 days. So I give my 3 days of slop in between every project. And so I can usually push and pull and contract to cram something in as long as it isn't like, some 16-hour epic.
Right.
And so that's generally how I've tried to just plot everything out, because my schedule goes out a long way, and then just make little holes as I go along when I have to. But there's only so far you can bend that.
Yeah, definitely.
There's also people, especially when you schedule far out, people tend to like miss their own dates.
Yeah.
This happens a lot. So a manuscript won't be ready on time, and I'll have to kick it down the road, and then all of a sudden there's a gap, and I shuffle things around and take advantage of the gap. I just kind of expect that about 20% of the books are going to miss a date if they are from independent authors and they aren't written yet. If they've already been written, I don't assume there's going to be any motion. But if they're still being written, there's a good likelihood, especially in COVID right now, that it's going to slip.
Yeah.
So I'm just mostly try to be prepared for that to happen as best I can.
Yeah. I'm with me right now. I'm just because I'm working full time. The kids are in school, being home. There's school at home right now. I'm right now. My process is just holding on, chipping away at my projects, staying in contact with all the authors, everyone that I have things booked with, and so far so good. We're all kind of juggling right now, and thankfully I don't have anything with any hard set deadlines, and the major publishers, like that would get first priority, of course. Do you ever have like a publisher come and say, hey, we need this in 3 weeks?
Yes, or 2.
Yeah.
Comanche was one of those. Comanche was like, we need this by the end of the month, and normally, I wouldn't have time, but I made the time just because I wanted the book, and I think it was like a 9-hour book. So it was something that I could find a way to fit in with a little extra work and a little creative scheduling.
Yeah.
I probably do. I don't work for like the big 5 publishers at all.
Yeah.
And it's so the Podium and Tantor are the kind of like the middle scale publishers that I work for. They're both fabulous. I love working with them a lot. And then I work with smaller publishers, which are usually owned by a couple of individuals. So like Mountain Dale and Athon and Shadow Alley and publishers like that. And then there's like a tier of authors that write regularly that I do stuff for, like Wong or Jeffrey Kohanek, people like that. And so I have kind of like these strata of how they schedule and do things. The further up you go, the more cemented the schedules get.
Right.
Because they're regimented further out. Usually the script is already edited and done before they even talk to you. It's just a longer time scale. But the more into you get, the shorter the timeline is. hey, I'm finishing writing this next week and I'm going to release the book 3 days later and let's get the audio done, you know, as quickly as possible after that. A lot of
Yeah,
them
yeah,
are on that kind of schedule.
yeah,
So you try and get it done as close to that as possible so that they can capitalize on it at release. Um, anyway, it's kind of like a sliding scale of how they
yeah,
operate. I
yeah. And I
think
have
I'm probably like 60% indies, maybe 40%
okay,
like publisher.
yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about Will Wight and your relationship with him as the author, and because you've done gosh, you know, his whole series here of
I think I've done 10 books for him
the
so
Cradle.
far.
Is that the
I
Cradle
know
series?
that and the Elder Empire, yeah. And I think
Yeah,
I'm starting the 11th soon.
yeah. And I think it's really cool when you kind of meet an author and really connect. And I've had a couple of those. When did you start? When did you first kind of
So
meet him? When did that? How did
I
that get rolling with Unsold? You're
Unsold
starting
was
with
just on
Unsold.
ACX.
Okay.
I just auditioned on ACX, just like anything else.
Yeah.
And and then I ended up talking to Will on the phone, and they gave me the book. I really enjoyed it, and we just kept rolling because there were at that point, I think, 5 books out.
Okay.
I want to say there were 5 books out, and so we were just like, okay, we're gonna do them all, and eventually we caught up, and then started doing them, you know, at least close to release, and then Audible Studios picked up the rights from them, and now I kind of have like a 3-way relationship between Audible Studios and Will. So Will has a publishing company. It's called Hidden Gnome, and his family works at it largely. Not just his family, but like his dad. So I talked to his dad, Billy, and they're just fabulous people. They're down in Florida. They're amazing. I love working with them. They're just wonderful, genuine, lovely human beings that are a pleasure to work with. So I totally lucked out in getting to work with them. And also it happens to be a book that a lot of people love because Will is a fabulous writer and writes
Hmm.
great characters and writes really compelling and extremely readable fiction. Um, he went to school for creative writing. He actually has a degree in creative writing. So he's very regimented in the way that he writes. He's really thoughtful about the way he assembles his stories. They are well edited, well tuned narrative machines.
Hmm.
So it's which means they're a lot of fun to narrate too.
Yeah.
And he writes great dialogue and great characters. So fabulous. Anyway, totally luck on my part though.
Yeah.
Totally
Yeah.
luck.
That's great. No, and that's how I feel, you know, the authors that I've really connected with and know that I'll have kind of a long-term relationship with. It's all just kind of luck of the draw. You know, with one, like for example, one book that I just picked up, the author had put it on ACX, and I was like, oh, I've seen that advertised, and I kind of hit her up, and I was like, well, I don't have much room on my schedule, but I was like, I'd like to help you find a narrator, and I kind of threw the link out to people, and she came back and said, well, can you audition for it? And I said, well, I guess I could, you know, and I did, and
I
she really liked
guess.
I guess, fine.
I
And
guess.
she really liked it, and, you know, and she's like, well, I'm willing to wait, you know, until whenever you can get to it, but I would definitely love to have you narrate this. And I'm like, and I said, you know, as long as it doesn't mess up any marketing or anything like that, you know, if you want to wait, great, you know. So it just, you know, random, like completely random.
Which book was that, or can you say?
It was Behind Blue Eyes, I want
Behind
to
Blue
say.
Eyes. Is it still pending? Is it still on your schedule?
It's still pending. Yeah, I penciled it in for December. I need to ask her how to pronounce her last name. Anna Masakat, Masakat, I want to say, but I need to ask her how to pronounce her last name. But so it'll be my second cyberpunk
Nice.
book, which I love the cyberpunk genre. So you know, but yeah, I mean, genre, you kind of find those genres, I guess, you really like, and I've noticed with you, the books that I like listening to you narrate are the ones with some like grizzled, sarcastic lead character who's seen some shit. You know?
I mean, I like
It's
them
my
all for
favorite one.
different reasons.
Yeah.
So I like those. You know what though? I would do if I could get if I could get some sweet romances, I would be all over that shit.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I might not be supposed to swear on this.
Of
I would
course
be
we can
all
swear on
over
this.
that
This
beauty.
is my podcast. I mean, like from Talon to Death Rights, really, enjoyed that book, things like that. I don't know. I'm sarcastic
I like those kind of
myself.
characters. They have a lot of bannery
Yeah.
dialogue, which is usually really enjoyable to do. Banner dialogue is just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Especially if it's well written. And even if it's only okay written, you can kind of turn the dial up a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
With a little work. So I really enjoy that stuff. But honestly, I enjoy almost everything. I think there's almost always something that's really fun to latch onto. So, but I do like snarky characters. They're always fun,
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, let's see here. Yeah, I'm the same way. I tend to find those when I'm working on a book like that. It's faster. I kind of move faster. I'm kind of into the story more. But I mean, as narrators, we have to stretch our legs. We can't just get comfortable with just doing the same thing over and over again. And that's kind of something that I've purposefully tried to do as far as scheduling my projects. Do you do anything like that, or is it, or do you just kind of...
So in general, I schedule things as they come.
Right.
And then I try to, as like I said earlier, just make room for stuff if I can that really specifically interests me or I want to spread out and do more of. But generally, I try and do everything kind of a first come, first serve. You want this done? Cool. I will do my best to do it. Here's when I can work on it. Let's get it scheduled. Let's get it on the books and then roll on. There's a lot of ongoing series work. The more series you do, they start to stack up, and sometimes you don't know when those are going to come, so that can be kind of a little unpredictable. Oh, hey, the next one in the series is coming out. Oh, crud. I would like to get that out fast for you. Because I think it's often hard as an author, especially if you're indie, knowing exactly when you're going to be done and remembering the lead time for getting audio completed. Also, it's hard for that to be in the forefront, especially if you are also an author who's doing it as like a second job.
Yeah. A lot of the authors I'm working with, we're all kind of in the same boat, and some are, more organized than others, and it's it's very, very similar kind of working.
I'm really impressed with how regimented a lot of the authors are. They stick to their word counts. They get their stuff done. They write on a schedule, and they pump out books at just an unbelievable rate. I got a lot of respect for that because I can't imagine having to drag that much up out of the mud every day and make it real. It's a lot easier to come along and be, the booster rocket or something for the audio version where you didn't have to engineer the thing. You just have to give it a little English.
Yeah, totally. And I find the writing process, I love it. I don't know if I could do it or not, but I have this huge, profound respect for the writing process and the words that they have put on the page because, I think the one recent book that I did, Revenant Son, he'd been working on it for 5 years, off and on, and finally the book's out and here I am just coming along and, just reading
work on this for a week or so. And
so, yeah, definitely.
I feel we kind of get to skip in toward the end. It's great as a narrator. It feels unfair. Otherwise, I think it helps to have an interest in writing when you're narrating. I think it makes it easier to see what an author is trying to accomplish to make sure that you are pushing in the same direction as they're trying to go. So I think it definitely helps to care about the writing process and appreciate it and have an interest in it. I like writing, but I'm not going to be writing any novels.
Right. I mean, because we're giving voice and interpretation, via the spoken word of their story. Yep. So there's definitely, we're kind of custodians of the story in a sense because you can give the wrong inflection and change the whole, narrative, or if you do it wrong, or
it's
just
very easy to change the meaning of a sentence with inflection. And I think intuiting what the author wants to do and figuring out the tone that they're trying to establish and what these characters would really say is, it's totally a developable skill, but I think it's largely rooted in caring about literature to some degree.
Yeah. let's talk a little bit about Talon, the Talon books, because I got put
Sure.
into a position that a lot of narrators fear in taking over a series,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that I had told myself I'm never going to take over a series. Forget that. There's just no way. But then when A.A. Warren came to me and was like, "Hey, Travis is really busy. I don't know if I want to push out, this anymore. Would you think about it?" And I said yes immediately because I love the book so much. And that I think was a very eye-opening kind of experience, kind of jumping in to, kind of in my mind,
Yeah.
audibly, an established series, characters, the main character, especially this guy Talon. My voice is very different from Travis Baldree's. I'm not, after I accepted it, I all of a sudden had a lot of insomnia preparing for it. And then the best thing you did when we talked was just like, have fun with it. That's it.
Yeah.
And I talked with Andrew about it, and he said the same thing. And but I wanted to be like respectful, like as the fan and as a fan and listener, like not to be like this crazy, 180 away from what had been
Yeah.
established. So that was like, I kind of had a lot of fun messing with that process because when I was first starting out, I'll try to get in the voice of Talon. I would go, "I'm Travis Baldree," like 70 times to just get the just saying I don't know. It was just saying your name would get me into the Talon mindset. It was really bizarre, but I think it worked. We'll see. It's we're waiting on Audible right now to release it. So,
It's one
AA,
of those interesting things to do because you don't, I mean, you're never going to sound, I've done this several times now too.
yeah,
And you're never going to sound like the other person.
no,
I think it just really gets down to who's the character and is your impression of the character the same?
right,
Like, does a listener come away and say, oh, that's still the same character? Maybe they cast a new dude to play him. It's like if somebody gets replaced, on as like a superhero,
mm-hmm,
who played it's still effectively the same character. That character was established in the comic books. They have an
mm-hmm,
expectation of how they act and how they sound, you know, but obviously it's going to be a different actor playing them. So as long as the essence of the character
right.
makes sense to the people who are listening, that should generally be enough. Um, but I've been in the same position several times now recently, and it's a weird position to be in.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine if I came in and was like, I'm Talon, like that,
Yeah, if you
then
suddenly made him a
people
prim
would,
British guy,
then
people
we may
mostly
have a
get upset
issue.
about accents and overall pitch and character tone. That's really
Hmm.
what I think they mostly get
Yeah.
annoyed with. It's because the common refrain is, well, it sounds like they didn't even listen to the other book. And obviously it's unrealistic for most people to go listen to the book when you're going in to narrate it. You don't have time
Right.
to go through, okay, this was a 6-book series and there are 400 characters. No, I didn't listen to all of them.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I had to do something similar. Well, it was weird, but I had to make a decision on what to do recently. So I do a series from Mountaindale called Artorian's Archives, which is a parallel series to Dakota Crowd's Divine Dungeon series,
Okay.
which was narrated by Vikas Adam and eventually Luke Daniels. Luke Daniels took over for Vikas. So
Okay.
there's already 2 renditions of all of
Wow.
these characters.
And
And
Vikas is very
the
expressive.
and they don't sound anything alike. They as voice actors, they don't sound anything alike, and their takes on the characters were also dramatically different from book to book.
Interesting.
And I believe it was written into the fiction as I think magical synesthesia. Hopefully, I didn't get that wrong. To explain the change, because it was like people are hearing due to this effect voices differently.
Okay.
So
That's funny.
Artorian's Archives is a parallel series that eventually meets up with the exact same timeline as the books and the other series, and all of a suddenly 30 characters jump over from the other series into it. And I was really worried
Oh
about
my
it
God.
because there were already 2 versions of all those characters. So I did here was my thought process. Okay, so there's 2 ways that people are they're gonna notice these characters. They're either gonna have listened to Vikas's version first,
Hmm.
and then they're gonna listen to mine. And they may have heard Luke's, but they'll have heard Vikas's first. and some percentage of them won't have made it all the way to the end. Or they'll have heard mine first, and then they'll switch over to the other series and start with Vikas. And so I made the decision, okay, well, I'm gonna try and respect Vikas's take on them. So what I did was I went through all of the audio,
Oh
got
my
all of
God.
the scripts. I had them give me 4 or 5 books worth of audio, found voice samples, pulled them out, and then said, okay, what would I do that at least will be recognizable as this character?
Mm-hmm.
Recorded them all, got somebody who was a fan of the audiobooks to listen to them and tell me what they thought and whether it got it across or not. And I altered, I think, two characters a little bit after doing that. And then I used that as the template.
Oh my
And
God.
so far, no one has complained.
And that's all you want. You just want, please don't complain about it.
Now, I don't know if I normally do that, but because it was a well-liked series that already existed, that I had to meet up with, that wasn't going to replace it, I felt like, okay, we'll try and do this.
Wow.
Currently, I'm doing a series for them again. I'm taking over for Luke Daniels. And originally, I was just going to take over after the first book. So he did the first book, was not going to be continuing on with the series through scheduling or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just going to do the subsequent books. But then eventually I decided to re-record it. So I'm currently re-recording it.
Wow.
But still, I'm not as specific about it. It's like, in places where I can nod to it, I will.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to be slavish about it because at the very least I get to start from the start. But there's still going to be some percentage of people that listen to the first book from Luke, and then we'll listen to my second version of the book. So I want to ease the transition a little without making it too jarring. Fortunately, almost everyone in it is from America, which helps.
Yeah, it's a crazy position to be put in. And I mean, mine was just minuscule compared to what you had to go through. Holy crap. I couldn't imagine doing all that prep. But I mean, it makes sense. I would probably have the same process because that was kind of what I was thinking with Talon was I was like, well, luckily only 3 characters, I think.
There's not that many recurring
over.
characters. Yeah. I mean,
so I was like, well, that's great. Talon is, space barbarian. Okay.
Yeah.
He's a grizzled space barbarian. Great. Then you had kind of we brought back a character from the first, no spoilers here, from the first book. Yeah. And your take on that was like, well, kind of a hard ass, but a bit sarcastic and bubbly at the same time. And then you had the kind of another more serious character. And I was like, okay, my whole goal was like, if I can do those 3 characters and at least get the essence of them across, I think we'll be good. Because everything else, alien voices and all that kind of stuff, that's the fun. That's the fun part. So, yeah, definitely. There's
It's so weird. It's so weird. It's all weird. I get it.
It's all what we do is weird. What we do is, we're all sitting in our little booths and talking to ourselves and reading these books.
I love how different it is from project to project.
Totally.
After coming from something where I spent 3 years working on the same thing until I loathe it, being able to work on something briefly, get in after, frankly, a lot of the hard work has been done,
right.
Have fun with it and get out is really refreshing.
Yeah.
It's pretty wonderful.
Yeah. I love it. I love doing this. And so I got to start wrapping up here soon.
Okay.
But I wanted to talk about, we need to talk about this because it won an award. You were nominated for an independent audiobook award as well as I was as well. You were nominated in the fantasy genre and myself in the horror genre. And you won the best fantasy audiobook for The Electrical Menagerie.
Yeah, that was Molly Reeder's book. It was a lot of fun.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I mean, the cover's amazing. It's
well, the weird thing is that cover came after the narration.
Oh, it's like a robo elephant?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The cover came after the narration. She basically relaunched the book later. It had a much simpler cover, I think, when I auditioned for it, even. Mm-hmm. But I was just interested in the vibe of it. It was kind of this steampunk magical adventure thing with kind of like a clean sort of feel to it. Mm-hmm. And I was attracted to that and wanted to do it. And fortunately, the audition worked out. And it was a real pleasure to do. Kind of has like almost like it's got this, I don't know, the main characters were just very clear to me. You got kind of like this Paul Newman-y sort of guy running the show, and his James McAvoy sort of I don't want to say, what is it? He's kind of like a engineer / magician that works with him, and their relationship together. It was a really pleasant book to do.
Awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. I have it. I have not. I'm behind on my listening. But I will be listening to that very soon. I snagged it.
Unbelievably far behind on my listening. I have no commute anymore.
Yeah, I know.
And you can't listen to audiobooks while you work on audiobooks. It's a real drawback to audiobooks as a profession. So,
and my day job is drawing in AutoCAD, and I try to, but I'm home, so I have kids running up and down the stairs. I got kids yelling at each other. They're in school now. They need help with something. My wife's there too. So like my wife and I are both kind of tag teaming, helping the kids in school and doing our own jobs at our own house. It's absolutely
not a lot of listening.
Bonkers right now. So, we'll end on this, because I'm a very visual person, and when I'm trying to, when I'm in the mood to browse for possible projects, I am very taken by book cover art. And they do say, you should never judge a book by its cover, but
you totally should.
You totally should. What's your approach with books? I love a good book cover.
I think a cover is indicative of how much effort the author is going to put into their book. While book covers cost money, they don't cost an unattainable amount of money. And having a decent cover is, I think, just part and parcel of writing a book, and it's just kind of indicative of, are they going to be able to market this? Do they care about their book for the long term? And so it's like a first pass filter for me.
Yeah.
If it's got a decent cover, then it means that, some things have been checkmarked along the way. And you can start looking at, you look at sales figures after that, and how it's written, and whether they have a public presence, and whether they interact with people, that kind of thing. So
yeah, that interaction is key too, and that's something through my about a year being into this, and just seeing what books have done well, what books haven't, because we're working here on royalties with some of the stuff, and the interaction with fans, just presence on social media, has had a direct correlation with books I've seen sell well and books that I've seen that I like that have not sold well. So it's awesome. All right, and one last thing I did. The podcast is called Audiobooks from Hell, and I bypassed all the horror stuff you've done, so I wanted to just hit a couple things really quick. You did a Charles L. Grant book for Crossroad Press. Jackals, yes.
Yeah, Jackals. Jackals is actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I actually had that on my shelf, the paperback of that. And then there's a book called Lost, which is kind of a thriller, but it came out in the 87. But if you look at the old paperback covers, the ones that I love, it's definitely
a little more lurid.
Well, it's they're just odd. Like the 80s cover, it's like, some kid looking scared through like a shattered mirror or shattered glass, just like, what is this? And that's what I love about those covers especially. But are there any other horror titles you can throw out there for people who would want to check out?
Black Marks. Golden. Werewolves.
Werewolf?
Yeah, that's a werewolf book. Black Marks. Peter Olden.
Nice. Awesome. And Dog Walker, is that what's Dog Walker?
Walker is like
There's
John dies at the end kind of book.
Okay.
It's funny and weird. It's got some horror elements, but it's not really a horror book. But it's a hoot. I love that book. It's a fabulous book. I wish more people had read or listened to that book, because it's great. What else?
Well, I will add it to my wish list.
Or other. The Deathrite stuff has a little bit of horror. I just did Comanche, which is borderline horror. It's like a ghost story almost. It's got some horror elements. And E.A. Copeland's got a new series called the Felix Cross Case Files, and I just did the first book for that, Shadows Over Hemlock, which is much more horror than Deathrite's, that whole series.
Nice.
And that was also a lot of fun.
All right. Cool. Very cool. Excuse me.
Yeah, that's me every morning. Every morning.
The booth crud. Yeah, every morning because I'll try to do a little bit before I head into the upstairs to my upstairs office. I try to end it every morning. It's the same thing. And before we sign off, you do have a couple. What's your latest releases here? And what's that one? Giant Land.
Giant Lands. Yeah, Aaron Oster. That one's fun. Gamelit basically. I guess I could just sort by new. New Beginning After the End book. The Beginning After the End series. I think the 6th one just came out. Catalyst just came out. Was the second in a fantasy series for Aethon. God, what else?
Oh, Hella. Great
Hella
title.
came out. Yeah, Hella came out. That was relatively recent. And a new one in Tao Wong's Thousand Lee series. Arsenal. That's the big crossover book with Mountaindale. That one just came out like a couple weeks ago, I think.
Awesome. Well, I mean, you look through your your list of books here, and it's definitely I love kind of seeing where certain narrators fall on the genre spectrum, and you look through your stuff, and I think people are going to find a lot of things that they like, and a lot of things to kind of keep finding more and more. You start unraveling that the ugly Cosby sweater, unravel that thread, and find more and more and more from Travis Baldree. So I shouldn't reference Cosby these days, but it's the first thing that popped into mind.
Well, at least you said ugly.
Yeah. All right. All right, Travis. Well, thank you so much for your time and chatting with me about your audiobooks and your process. Really appreciate it, and hopefully people found a lot to dig on.
Thanks, Sean.
All right. I'm horrible at wrapping up podcasts, so we'll fade out to music right there.
Bum, bum.
I'll talk to all of you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, man.